Welcome to the C.S. Joseph podcast. I'm your host, C.S. Joseph, naturally, obviously. And today's episode is not exactly, I'm not a fan of the question, but at the same time, I understand that someone's got to ask the question sometime eventually, so I'm not too, butthurt about it. I mean, it is what it is. So today's question is, how can an ISTP forgive himself for being sexually abusive, which is a crazy question, but I totally understand why it's being asked, and I understand the spirit with which it was asked. So I'm actually going to be referring to a show on Disney Plus that I would actually recommend to the ISTP to watch, so that they can understand what it takes to be on the path to redemption, right? And that's ultimately what this episode is about. It's about redemption. But before I begin, obviously I don't sexually abuse anybody. I mean, that goes without saying. I was sexually abused. I've been sexually abused from age 5 to 14, and that sucked. And there was other certain situations in my adulthood which were less than classy, we'll say. And it's just, shit happens. I'm not trying to make excuses or justification for anyone. But here's the thing. The people who have abused me, guess what? I did forgive them. Especially if they admitted it. But I do forgive them. That doesn't mean they get to be in my life, right? Doesn't mean I want them in my life, but I forgave them. So great. What is it, awesome. Yeah, I mean, family members and whatnot, but still, I still love them. And it's just, that's just me. I'm able to forgive that. Not everybody is, and I don't expect everyone to be able to. It's really painful, So, but anyway, there's a show on Disney Plus that involves an affiliative ISTJ and a pragmatic ISTP. And this Disney show is called Falcon and Winter Soldier. It's one of the Marvel shows, basically. And I recommend watching the show because there's one of the core themes about the show. The Winter Soldier, he's an ISTP, and he's carrying this huge burden of guilt because he was used as an assassin, and he killed people all the time. And there was one particular situation in the show, and I don't care, spoiler alert, whatever. There's one particular situation in the show where he ended up killing a man's son, basically. And throughout the entire show, he goes and has lunch with this man as part of his redemption arc, and he's feeling so guilty. So he befriends the man whose son he killed, and this man doesn't even know that he killed his son. This man doesn't even know that he was an assassin, and his son just basically got caught in the crossfire, basically. And to get rid of witnesses, his son witnessed an assassination, and his son ultimately basically got caught in the crossfire, and then, the Winter Soldier killed him. The Winter Soldier is an ISTP. He carries guilt with an extroverted feeling inferior, which is likely what this ISTP Acolyte who asked this question, So I know I'm not revealing any names, and it's all anonymous and whatnot, so don't worry about it. But the reality of the situation is that the guilt that's carried around by extroverted feeling inferior can be absolutely detrimental, if not debilitating, and ultimately can actually lead to an ISTP committing suicide. And don't get me wrong, the Winter Soldier definitely considered that for a long time. It's definitely something that's been in his head, definitely something that he's faced personally, throughout throughout the show, basically as a fictional character, as much as we can. And he befriended Falcon in the show, and then Falcon is this affiliative STJ who is just giving him advice as to what to do. And Falcon was like, hey, for all these people on your list and all these people that you killed, all these innocent people that you killed, just put in the work. Literally put in the work. You have to go up to them and be strong enough to actually admit wrong. Admit that you did something wrong. because it's only through admitting something wrong that you will actually be able to gain healing, to gain redemption. Because remember, folks, like the ISTP lesson of the demon, of introverted feeling demon, is that they have to, instead of rely on external sources of acceptance, they have to learn how to gain self-acceptance for themselves. They have to learn that. And oftentimes, you know, people don't know, right? People don't know how, like ISTPs don't know how to not rely on external sources of validation, basically, in order for them to accept themselves and be able to live with themselves. Especially if they did something as bad as sexual abuse, or as bad as murder or assassination in the case of the Winter Soldier, right? So really, my first piece of advice is to, like, seriously, just go watch that show and follow the advice that Falcon gives the Winter Soldier, and then actually do it. Take full responsibility for your actions. What's really great about Falcon in that show is that him being an ISTJ, he has the deadly sin of wrath, right? He has the cognitive origin of justification, but his living virtue is absolution. And that's ultimately what the Winter Soldier is looking for. That is actually what their friendship is based on. The Winter Soldier is looking for absolution, and the Falcon character ends up becoming the source of absolution for the Winter Soldier. And so based on that, the Winter Soldier then is like, okay, and then he goes to the man and he actually admits to the man at the very end, you know, I killed your son, right? And of course it cuts out there because we don't see what happens next. We'll probably see it in the next Falcon and Winter Soldier if there is another episode. So that's the thing. And that's really what it takes. Because the ISTJ was telling the ISTP is like, hey, if you want absolution, you got to put in the work. You have to earn that absolution. And ultimately, if you want that and you need that absolution in order to gain self-respect, or self-acceptance, because of introverted feeling demon, right? You can't rely on external sources for your acceptance. You yourself have to become your own source of acceptance. You have to awaken your introverted feeling demon. But even introverted feeling demon knows that the good thing is to go out there and admit that you did something wrong. One thing about wrath types, which is super interesting about them, is that once they feel justified in being wrathful towards someone, and then that other person takes their wrath, then all of a sudden that person, they just instantly forgive that person, because that leads to justification. Because, okay, they paid the price, great, I can move on, and then they just forgive that person. That's why ISTJs are sources of forgiveness and sources of redemption. That's what the Winter Soldier is looking for, right? ENFPs do the same thing, right? It's just a little bit more intimate when it comes from the perspective of an ISTJ, instead of, you know, something that's very charitable and something that's available to everyone, and a standard of absolution, a standard of redemption, a standard of forgiveness, which is what ultimately an ENFP provides. Whereas an ISTJ, it's more on a case-by-case basis because of their introverted thinking critic that comes from their ESTP shadow, their unconscious, psychologically speaking, right? So that's really what you have to do. So the answer to this question is literally the following. Put in the work. Literally, put in the work. As the Falcon said to the Winter Soldier, put in the work. You have to have something concrete to show for it at the end of the day. And the only concrete thing that you can do as an ISTP at the end of the day is admit fault. Admit it. Go admit fault. Take full responsibility for your actions to the people that you damage. And you know what? Chances are, if you're an ISTP, maybe this person is an ISTJ. Maybe this person is an ENFP. Maybe this person will actually forgive you. And then because they forgave you, because you had the guts, because you had the balls to seek absolution, because you had the balls to admit it, you know, at a minimum, they may not forgive you, they may not absolve you, they may not give you that redemption, but, you know, at least God the Creator would, because you were a man. You were man enough to admit fault. And that's what it takes. That's literally what it takes. So the answer to the question is, ultimately, make sure you are putting in the work. Because if you're not putting in the work, you're being fake. And that's why you're so depressed all the time. That's why you feel worthless all the time. That's why you feel useless all the time. That's why you can't forgive yourself, because you know, your SI critic knows at the end of the day, you are not putting your effort into the right place as an ISTP. That's the facts. That's the truth. And if you actually want to have a future, if you actually want to be able to accept yourself, put in the work. Use the wisdom of your SI critic. Sure, you might end up incarcerated. Sure, you might end up in jail over it. Sure, there's a ton of really bad consequences. But at the end of the day, I think those things are much better than committing suicide. Okay? So go put in the work, regardless of the risk. That's my recommendation, and that's my advice on this particular question. Anyway, folks, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.